On this edition of Prime Sports NASCAR, brought to you by RaceReviewOnline.com, KennyBruce.net, and Covers.com, we're going to preview the AAA 400 from Dover International Speedway as Jimmy Johnson defends his win last year, his 11th all-time at this track. Complete driver analysis, the latest odds, picks, and more as Prime Sports NASCAR on the Prime Sports Radio Network starts now. All right, it is Thursday, May 3rd, 2018. I'm Greg DePalma. You're listening to Prime Sports NASCAR as we enter Week 11 of the 2018 season. Make sure to visit Covers Experts at experts.covers.com. You take 50% off any purchase by using the promo code PRIME50. That's PRIME50. So, and that's for NASCAR. That's for any other sport. So, of course, Covers knows handicappers, including Eric Smith. They all do a great job. So, but anyway, it's time to talk NASCAR and Dover. Last week it was Talladega. So welcome in CJ Radoon first to the show. And CJ, what did you think about the race last week?
Well, it was interesting, wasn't it? I mean, not a whole heck of a lot of passing going on. Nobody really able to make a move. Kind of single file. It's not the typical Daytona that we're kind of used to, or Talladega, I should say, that we're used to. So interesting in that regard.
Yeah, and I mean, overall though, it happens to just be such a luck race all the time. Either one of these races. And I don't really think there's anything you can do about that. I should ask you, though, I don't think I've asked this question in a while. If they didn't have restrictor plates, how fast do you think they'd go?
Oh, I think they could probably get close to, I don't know, between 215, 220. They've got a ton of horsepower, and they're really aerodynamic, low to the ground. I mean, even with the restrictor plates, we saw in practice doing over 200 miles an hour. So I think if you give them that little extra bit of horsepower in the draft, if they get a tow from somebody, I wouldn't blink if they went up to about 220.
Now, do you also think that there would be the pack racing, the speed, the passing in general would be a lot different?
Oh, absolutely. The restrictor plate bunches everybody up because the only way that you can go fast really is if you're in a group of people and nobody's got enough horsepower to really break through. I think if you go super fast, if you take the restrictor plates off, just let them go, obviously you're going to have the difference at the top end of the engines. You might also introduce a little bit more tire wear as well. So obviously with everybody cruising around at 200 miles an hour with one another, tire wear was a little bit different last week, but generally at Talladega, you don't have to worry about that. And I think that going that fast into the corners, putting that much load into the outside tires with the compounds that they have, I think you'd start seeing the field break up quite a bit. The challenge, though, is going that fast. The cars really don't have all the safety features. I mean, they're not carbon fiber, they're tubular metal. So dissipating a very high rate of speed and impact would be very difficult for them. And I think we'd see a lot more airborne cars as well.
Yeah. And do you think there'd be more passing and generally a more exciting race compared to the other super speedways that are out there?
Yeah, it's wide enough. Yeah, absolutely. So you could probably choose different lines as you go up and down on the racetrack. Not a whole heck of a lot of braking. So that's a spot where some of the other tracks have an advantage. So even at, Atlanta and Charlotte and places like that, as fast as they are, you still have to brake to get into the corner. And I'm not sure that they would necessarily have to do that. You'd probably get some guys lifting, and you talk about it at the Indy 500 as well. You can do a full lap in an Indy car without lifting there. You can just be flat on the throttle the whole time, and I think you could do the same at Talladega in a Cup car. But when you're going that fast, it's a big difference. So you might have people lifting as they enter the corner.
How fast do they go at the 500?
At the 500, they've been over 230, so they're entering corners closer to 240 miles an hour, and that's a much tighter corner with not a lot of banking, only 9 degrees of banking in those turns.
Well, what about the safety, though? Isn't a stock car supposed to be safer?
Well, it's safer because your head's not exposed.
Sure.
You're covered and all that good stuff. But I think the carbon fiber and the way that those cars are built to withstand impact, they shed pieces to absorb the impact rather than transferring it through to the driver. I just don't think NASCAR's got that. As the only crushable features they've got are the sheet metal on the outside and some styrofoam in between.
Okay.
Other than that, you've got the tubular frame. So it's a different kind of ball game, actually.
Okay. Now, I get this story came out that Monster Energy, the entitlement sponsor for NASCAR, I guess they're signed through now to 2019. I guess the question I got to ask is why, and maybe I don't know. To me, this would tell me, and I guess you'd have to compare it to the other contracts over the years with the entitlement sponsors, but shouldn't, when you put a deal this significant together with a company, shouldn't it be longer than a couple of years?
That was the exact same thought that went through my mind when they came out with the announcement. I can't believe it's just 1 year. It's almost like a signal that they're going to get out, right? It's interesting. I don't know whether ratings have been on the decline. I think we've seen that pretty consistently over the past couple of years. Maybe Monster, now that they're this far into it, just aren't seeing the return that they want quite there yet. So maybe they're going to keep it on for another year. I don't know. Yeah, generally speaking, when you do something that big with an entitlement sponsor, you want to do it for multiple years. So to the extent that they just did it for 1 year, it was very surprising to me. It seems like it's got to be on Monster's end, though. I wouldn't say it's on NASCAR's end. It gives it behooves them to have a sponsor locked in as long as they can go.
Sure.
I think it's just Monster and the business decision, the environment that they're at, given the return.
Yeah, well, so again, it's not a good sign for NASCAR to have their biggest sponsor that they have to worry about every year or two, because that confuses the look. There's so many changes that we just had the stages and all that, but you don't want to confuse the average sports fan. Because those are the guys and girls you want to bring in as fans, and you're constantly changing the brand name of your corporation every couple of years. That's not good, because it's it is the only sport. Well, I mean, as far as the major sports, and let's not compete with the other series in auto racing, but it is the only sport. With baseball, football, and all those other major sports. I mean, they're not sponsored, so.
Correct.
It's just the way it is. It is, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but again, I think this goes back to what we've talked about before. I just think that at some point NASCAR needs to kind of take a step back and maybe just kind of blow up the entire plan and kind of get with it with where we are in today's world. And I know they've done a very good job of making changes over the years, and we've heard the old school fans kind of feel like they're being left out at the track, or they would like to have things the way they were. But look, that's in every sport. Every sport talks about that. I think NASCAR needs to just blow things up and kind of get this thing going. Sort of like hockey. I know hockey was in a bad way for a while, and then they made some significant changes, and one of the more significant changes that they made was with making sure, as far as penalties, and the more penalties you call, and the more emphasis on the speed of the game, puts more goals in the net and makes it more exciting, and that's what the fans want to see, and that's what we're seeing today in the sport, and that's why it's starting to get more. It should be getting more popular because it's fun to watch hockey again, even in the postseason. NASCAR's got to do something like that. They've got to blow things up, and again, I'll throw in this salary cap once again, as I think where maybe it has to start. That has to be the starting point.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I think it's really cool to watch kind of how the FIA is doing it. So they're the sanctioning body for Formula One. And obviously there's similar complaints about Formula One alienating the fan base. Its costs are too high, blah, 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 not a lot of passing. But they started the Formula E series. So they've got this new electric series that they've been incubating for a couple of years off to the side, and it's become really popular. And it's
why is that?
Now millennials are flocking to it. So a younger fan base in general finds it more exciting. I think the racing is extremely close. It's an electric car. All the cars are spec chassis, so everybody's kind of in the same boat, and it's all up to the driver's ability. And they go to tracks that are right in downtown city center, so they're right in the heart of the action. So it's been neat to watch that series kind of grow. If NASCAR could do that with one of the series, they just bought ARCA. Why not use that as kind of a testing ground to be able to blow something up and grow it into something that it could be potentially transitioned over to the Cup Series in the future, kind of like what you said hockey did.
Do you agree with that, Eric?
Yeah, sorry guys, I caught a little bit of into that, but yeah, it's I think it's the Formula One, F1E or something that CJ is talking about, and yeah, IndyCar is not a direct kind of competitor to them. They're kind of a branch off of F1 a little bit, but CJ's right. I mean, that series, I'm not a huge fan of it just because I like car noise and horsepower and all this, and there's literally no car noise. It's electric. But the crowds are huge. The ratings are jumping up. They're on Fox. They're on a major network. Sometimes you'll catch them on Fox or FS1, but they're all in downtown street circuits, whether it be in Argentina, Buenos Aires, or London. They're racing the streets of London or Paris. They're hitting major cities and they're getting a big crowd, and their fans are millennials, so they're reaching out to them. And there's a reason you look up and you see all these manufacturers: Ferrari, Mercedes, Lotus, all these
Jaguar.
big name car dealerships are going there. And it seems like with IndyCar and NASCAR, they're leading. They don't want to come here. Why are they wanting to go there? Well, it's because they're targeting their target market. They're targeting big cities. And Robin Miller with Racer, I talked to him, and he wrote a good article a couple weeks ago about how ovals are dying. Nobody wants to go to oval races anymore. It doesn't matter where you put it.
Yeah.
You just look at the crowds. Look at NASCAR. It's majority oval.
Yep.
IndyCar, it seems like oval races outside of Indy, the attendance isn't there. You might get 20,000 people there. Well, they go to a road course or a street circuit, and you get, Long Beach, for example, a couple weeks ago, had 180,000 people there. That's more than most of the other ovals on the IndyCar schedule combined that go there. So,
and you're racing on
NASCAR,
the street, like you said, so it's not like you're building a racetrack.
No, yeah, they're literally – and the only drawback to that is kind of the inconvenience for the locals. They usually set a turnaround time 4 weeks beforehand. They got to start putting walls and fences up, and then they'll take a couple weeks after to tear down. But it's in their city.
Yeah, it's got to help their economy.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
I was out in Baltimore when the IndyCar was out there on that street. It ended up failing in the end just because of the Baltimore Ravens football games and an Army-Navy football game, and Ohio State was playing in the football stadium. Just the dates weren't working out. But we'd go, after the IndyCar stuff was done, just to a local bar, which is literally right next to the track. And these fans were loving it, that they could go a week beforehand, they're driving down the streets, and a week later they're sitting in a bar right next to this track watching cars, or a Starbucks is right there.
Yep.
So I've always wondered what NASCAR would look like on a street course. I mean, they race really good on road courses. It seems like there's drama. They've got a bump and bang. What would happen if you put a NASCAR race in, say, downtown New York, in Manhattan? What would happen if you put a NASCAR race there? What kind of target market are you going to get? I bet you get a lot of fans just casually what is this?
Well, isn't the problem though that they're facing is the roots, where they came from, and that they would continue to push further away from their roots. But again, if you're going to reach a certain pinnacle of your popularity, which is still, they're so far from that, it's incredible, and yet it's reachable, it's doable. They just have to do it. They've got to make the changes, and I don't know where that starts.
Yeah, they've already pushed back because their roots are southeast, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
That is NASCAR's roots, and I wrote about this last year, that about a little more than a decade ago, it's like they turned their back on their true hardcore fan base, and you started taking a race away from Atlanta and you put it in California.
Yeah.
Or you take a race away, 2 races at Darlington, you take one away and you put it in Kansas. you start turning your back on them long enough that people don't want to come back. And that was IndyCar's problem in the mid-'90s. They split. And you got all these traditionalists that they left, and they have no interest in coming back. And like my uncle, for example, he was part engineer, part gas man in IndyCar, and he worked in there for years, and he's not coming back. And it's like, you've worked in it for that long, and you don't have any interest. He's coming to town for the 500, and my aunt and cousins are going to the race. He's not. He has no interest. So it's like, how do you get those fans back? And the problem is, you really don't.
No, you got to go after the young ones. Yeah, you
got to target the young fans.
Yep. And again, that's why you have to. That's why I'm saying, as I said in the beginning of this conversation, you got to blow it up. You have to blow it up, and you have to start over, and you have to think modern. And because if they don't do that, we're going to be on this show year after year complaining about the same stuff every year, week in and week out. No matter how much they try to tinker with the cars, as long as they keep the cars generally the same and the tracks generally the same, they're not going to get the type of racing that the new fans want. And what are you going to do? We're just going to, bide our time. And I don't know. Again, that's why I think I asked you about this about a month ago. And I don't know, CJ, what you think about whether or not there is somebody either already in the organization that can eventually take over, or is this something based on the way the organization is set up that nothing's going to change for a long time?
Well, it's a family business, isn't it? So
yeah.
Nothing's going to change for a long time, sadly. I mean, until they relinquish control, the France family kind of lets go, and you get somebody who's, innovative, like bringing out Formula E and not afraid to try new things like Liberty is with Formula One now. I just don't think you're going to see the drastic kind of change. I mean, give them all credit in the world because they're doing things like you got the Charlotte Roval this year, all the tweaks, etc.
They're trying.
But you're right. They're afraid to get that major kind of revolutionary change going, and I just don't think that'll come until the France family is not in it anymore.
All right. Well, this week it is Dover. And this is one of the toughest tracks to pass in the series. So, matter of fact, I think it was a couple weeks ago when we were going over one of the races, and we were talking about how, wow, you get like 15 different drivers can win this race, and there's probably about, realistically, like there's going to be about, like the favorites are the ones that should win this race. You're going to look at the usuals, the Kyle Busches, the Kevin Harvicks, and then you go, okay, maybe Kyle Larson and Martin Truex, and of course Jimmy Johnson, the favorites. But after that, boy, is it going to be? You're going to be okay. Maybe if Chase Elliott, because he's kind of considered a favorite, but he's never won a race before. So I just don't. I think it's slim pickings in trying to find good long shots this week, Eric. I mean, there are a few out there, like maybe Clint Boyer at 25-1, because last year in both races he did well. He was fourth early in the race. He had a broken oil tank, done. He finished sixth in the October race, and we know he's racing better this year than he ever has. So I would look at Boyer at 25-1, maybe Eric Jones, but I'm sick of saying Eric Jones every week. And then, the new one would probably be Daniel Suarez. I mean, at 80-1, I threw a couple of bucks on him considering how he raced here last year and his success in the Xfinity Series. But that's it. I don't really see a whole lot else as far as legitimate long shots. And, of course, normal long shots anyway don't win, in the Cup Series anyhow.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Because every week on my racereview.com website, I'll do an early 5 favorites and 5 sleepers before the odds get adjusted. And this week I was stretching for the sleepers and I have the same 4 that you said, just because this is a track, 89% of the winners have started in the top 15. And you think how long they've been going to Dover. So, and there's 2 races a year there. So you got to think that out of that many races, 89% have started in the top 15. Well, who starts in the top 15? Your top drivers.
Yep.
So, and that's a hard track to qualify on just because the sensation of speed is so high because the turns are so banked and the straightaway's kind of banked. So you kind of dip going into a turn. So it's highly difficult to qualify there. So that's why your cars with the most speed during the year usually races well there. So, and all those drivers you mentioned, that's really about it. I mean, I can think of maybe 8 to 10 that's got a shot to win, and really everybody else is just you're running for 10th on back. Truex, I looked at, he's qualified on the front row there 3 straight years and 3 straight races and 4 of the last 6 there. He's got 13 top 10 starts and 16 tries there. He's been fast this year. He's had a bad string of races, which was expected. Those aren't his best tracks coming into here. I think he's going to have a great race, and he's got a lot of speed. How do you pass a guy like that on a track that you really can't pass on? So he's going to be there. Larson, he's had kind of bad luck this year, but I think he's going to be there. He led 241 laps in this race last year. He led 137.
He should have won the race last year. I mean, let's be real. This was one of those races that just drove you nuts when you watch the end of this race. This is one of those races that drives you crazy once again about this series because Larson was clearly the best driver besides Truex. Like you said, he led 241 laps. Jimmy Johnson got lucky. They played the game of let's stay out long on one of those long stretches, see if we get a caution. Lo and behold, they get a caution. So that puts him in a good position to try and win the race late. But even then, Kyle Larson had to lead with 4 laps to go. Another caution comes out, and Johnson took that lead by like a fraction of an inch as they were running in overtime, and that was it. They called the race. Yep. It's over. I mean, are you kidding me?
That's one of those that, and a lot of people probably listen and don't realize this. I'm sure CJ's done this too. That when you're at the track or you're trying to get your story up and you got to recap and a race is going like it was, where it looks like this is Larson's to lose, you start writing about that race because you got a lot of other storylines you work on, and you might want to go to pit road and get an interview or two, and you want to get the recap up first. You write it all up that Larson's going to win, and then that happens. And it's like, you've got to be kidding me. And I compare that to, like you said, why some fans tune out is a stick and ball sports. Imagine a football game where you've got the Dolphins playing the Patriots, and the Dolphins are up by 3 scores all game, and then Tom Brady throws a Hail Mary in the end, and they give him 24 points for it. Yeah, and they win. It's
exactly.
Like, I just wasted 3 hours of my day watching this.
Yes.
When I could have watched the last 5 minutes.
Yes.
So that goes to part of the problem. And Dover's kind of a track like that. The spring race, albeit, has a lot of cautions. The fall race, for some reason, doesn't.
Okay.
I don't know why.
All right.
They've only had, what looks like 5 or less cautions for the last 5 fall races. But the spring race, we've had double digits, it seems like, almost every year. I don't know why. So this race could definitely have something like that happen. So those favorites are ones to watch, but Suarez finished 6th and 8th in each race last year.
Yeah.
So
and he's got an Xfinity Series win at this track, 5 top 10s and 6 races in the Xfinity Series. He's coming in after back-to-back 10th place finishes. So he would be a definite deep long shot that if you're going to take Daniel Suarez anytime during the year, you take him this week.
This would be the week to do it, yes. And I looked, and I don't know if the lines have updated today, but yesterday he was at plus 8,500.
Yep, 80 to 1. That's where he is.
So
yep.
Why not?
Absolutely.
Chase Elliott didn't have the greatest of odds, and he's never finished outside the top 5 there in a Cup race.
Yeah, that's.
If you remember, he should have won in the fall.
Yeah, 8 to 1. That's the only bad thing, CJ, about Chase Elliott is that you want to take him because he's got 4 top 5s in all 4 Cup races there, 4 top 10s in all 4 Xfinity Series races there. He led 138 laps in October. Okay, he's waiting for his first win. He's 3rd and 2nd in his last 2 races the last few weeks. So, yeah, this is definitely a week you want to take Chase, but he's sitting there at 8 to 1, only a couple of spots behind guys that are the top drivers in the sport. It drives you crazy as far as the odds sometimes.
Yeah, with those odds, I would not take Elliott. He's great from a fantasy perspective going into this week. He's been fantastic at Dover, like you said, all the good results. But like you said, you've got 5 other guys right ahead of him that are likely going to win. To spend 8-1 on him for basically zero return, you might as well throw your money away. Suarez is a good one, but if you're talking about Jimmy Johnson and Chase Elliott doing better, if you really want to take a gamble, I'm not sure what his price is right now, but William Byron might be one to look at. So that team obviously on the up and up now in the past couple of weeks. Byron's been doing pretty well all season compared to the rest of them. Now that the team's on the upswing, does he learn something from them? He's been, top 10 finisher in both of his Xfinity races there, started on the pole, etc. So he might be a good one to look at as well.
Yeah, Byron actually, his second best race of the year was Phoenix when he finished 12th. Of course, Phoenix is the other 1 mile track. So you got Phoenix and you got New Hampshire. Now, but this is definitely a week, Eric, where you do not want to take Penske, correct? Because Keselowski and Logano have done nothing here over the last 3 years. Logano's led 3 laps in his entire career here, and all 3 of them did nothing at at Phoenix.
Yeah, this is definitely one I would stay far away from the Penske guys. One, because of their odds. They're kind of mid-pack there. The upside is just very little. Logano has never finished in the top 5 at Dover in the spring race, and he's got 1 top 5 in the fall race. So as good as he's been this year, as far as he won last week, he's finished outside of top 10 just once all year. I don't think I would trust him to really battle for a top 5 much this week. Keselowski's kind of the same thing. He won in the fall of 2012, and he had a 5-race string where he finished in the top 5 in 4 of them. But since, he's got 1 top 5, and he's only got 3 total top 10s, and that's all since 2012. So I would caution with Keselowski, too. This just isn't one of his better tracks. And Ryan Blaney has finished 23rd or worse his last 3 Dover starts. Yes, he won the Xfinity race there last year, but on the Cup level, he's just not there.
Yep.
And I just don't think this is their weekend. The heavy hitters are going to be the heavy hitters that we've already spoke about.
Yeah.
So if you were going to take a flyer on somebody, as CJ said, Byron, Suarez, those might be your better value. These guys, I would just stay away.
Yeah, even Eric Jones, who's same odds basically as Ryan Blaney, is a better way to go. 9th at Phoenix. Top 10 in this race last year when he had a tire go down. That was in the final stage. And his results last year weren't all that bad. No top 10s, but he did wreck in this race last year. And he does have a win, and he's led 200 laps in 5 Xfinity Series races. So, look, I think if Blaney was with a different team this week, I would go with Blaney because of all of his Xfinity success at this track. But throw him in that Penske team with their history at this track, and I'm sorry, it's just not a good week. And 1 milers just don't seem like the plan right now for Penske. CJ, if you had to go with Kyle or Harvick, Kyle's definitely the guy this week, right? Because look, as CJ was saying, as Eric was saying before about the starting position, he has started in the top 2 rows in 7 of his last 10 races at this track, including a pole. He's got 2 runner-ups and a win in his last 5 races, including the win in last October, where Harvick in his last 4 races has not finished better than 9th, and he hasn't led a lap in his last 3 races at Dover, which is surprising considering before those last 3 races, he had led a combined 786 laps in 4 races, including a 355-lap win in 2015.
Yeah, I think Kyle Busch is the one to go with. He's got a better start average here, 3.312 in his last 4 races at the track, a second and a first in those last 4 races as well. Harvick's not a bad choice, though. He's going to start probably more likely than not deeper in the field than Kyle Busch, which gives Busch the advantage, as I just said. However, you got to remember with Harvick's 2 races last year, I think the first one he got caught under caution and went a lap down, had to take the wave around, so that kind of put him behind. And then in the fall race, I think he had a loose wheel that he had to make an unscheduled pit stop for. So hasn't been out front in the lead, but he's also been dealing with problems the past couple races at this track. So I think hopefully, if he's able to avoid them, if they're on their game this week, he could do a little bit better than he has in the recent races.
Kyle's 3-1. Harvick is 5-1. So you are getting nearly double on Harvick at this time. But yeah, Kyle looks like the guy to go with. By the way, Harvick won Phoenix and Kyle finished second at Phoenix. So it could be, as we've been saying all along here, one of those favorite type of races. Eric, Larson and Truex, I might actually decide I'm going to go with one of those two drivers instead of Kyle or Harvick, because I can get, as long as the odds are doubled, because we talked about how Larson probably should have won this race last year. He's been 11th or better in 7 of 8 races there, 4 top 5s, 2 runner-ups. He led 378 laps in both races last year, including the 241 in this one. And Truex, 11th or better in 8 straight races at Dover, including 3 straight top 5s with 340 laps led, and also won both stages in this race last year. So I would, if I'm getting double the money on Larson, Truex versus Kyle, I might go with one of those guys just because of the odds.
Yeah, I agree. Those two, I don't want to say they're definitely going to be good because anything can happen, but if there's anybody that are going to be pretty much locks for top 10, it's those two. But I think either one could win. Larson scared me a little bit just because of how his overall body of work with the new Chevy is this year compared to his previous stats with the old car.
Sure.
But I look at Bristol, and which is it's about half the size of Dover, but it's a high bank concrete track. Dover's a high bank concrete track, so you can take a little bit over. And Larson finished second to Kyle Busch that day. So, and he finished second in this race. We said last year he finished second in this race the year before. So he's due. He's only finished worse than 11th once in his whole career at Dover. So I would slide a little bit towards Larson just because I know how bad he wants to win right now.
Yeah.
And he was pretty good at Richmond before he and Jamie McMurray had a little bit of unwarranted drama there where McMurray ran into him and during a caution flag, which damaged his car a little bit. So Larson's shown to be pretty good on tracks about a mile in length or shorter. Truex enters with a little bit of bad momentum. He's already won a race this year, so he doesn't have to win, but he always has run well at Dover. That's the site where he got his first career Cup win. He considers it his home track because he grew up the road in New Jersey. So I think he's going to be there too. I want to give the edge to Truex just because I think he's going to start higher. He's already won as many poles the last couple of years at Furniture Row than he won his whole career before.
Okay.
So I think he's going to be a pole contender, but if you want to look at a fantasy value for your start differential and your finish, I think Larson's your guy.
And by the way, the other thing to consider, Truex was 5th at Phoenix, Larson was 18th, and Truex in his last 4 races this year does not have a top 10 with finishes of 26th, 30th, and 37th. So we do have to keep that in mind. But like I said, you are getting double the odds. Hendricks, CJ, they're doing better. No question about it. All across the board, Hendricks is doing better. And Jimmy Johnson has odds of 8-1. I must say this. I wonder if this was 3 or 4 weeks ago, even when Jimmy was struggling, if he would still get 8-1 odds, because I get the feeling you might. And therefore, I look at 8-1 and I go, you know what? Maybe that's not a bad idea. I haven't really taken Jimmy Johnson or thought of taking him all year, but they're going well now. He just finds ways to win at this track. He's led over 3,000 laps here, which is incredible. And he won last year starting basically in the rear after a gear change and had that luck. So, and then we talked about Chase Elliott also at 8-1. So I'd have to consider a Hendrick car this week. I'm not so sure about Bowman, even though he has 3 top 10s in his last 5. But I might consider Byron as a deep long shot too at 200-1 based on what you talked about before with his success in the Xfinity Series and the fact that he's been racing a lot better lately too.
I think Hendrick's a good gamble this week, especially Jimmy Johnson. His odds probably a couple weeks ago, even with the struggles, probably would have been, I don't know, maybe 9-1 instead of 8-1. But yeah, it's still, I mean, somebody that's got 11 wins at this track, over 3,000 laps led. It's insane how successful he is at this track. And even when he's down and out, he finds a way to get it done. And I think some of that translates over to some of his teammates. The team is definitely on an upswing across the board. I think Byron and Johnson are 2 to go with. I think Chase Elliott's got a little bit more stacked against him. I know he wants to win, and he's probably pretty close to doing that again. You know, he's not reaching the heights that he was toward the end of last season, but he's starting to approach them again. Of the bunch, Johnson and Byron are probably the 2 to go with. Johnson more confident, obviously, with his 11 wins in his pocket.
Eric, what do you think about when you have to decide between Elliott and Johnson? They're both 8-1 right now, even though Elliott is doing better with the third and the second in the last two races. He was also third at Phoenix. Jimmy Johnson was just 14th at Phoenix. And we did talk about Chase Elliott's success here at this track over his career in both series. So would this be one of those weeks that even though Johnson has all this history, that you would go with Elliott, or would you stay with the history in Johnson?
It's hard. It's one of those, like, what does your head say? What does your heart say? The smart choice, I think, would be Elliott, only because the speed is a little bit more there for him now than Johnson is. Now, Johnson's running well, but I hate to make picks fully off of history. History would say go with Johnson. It'd be a no-brainer. But Elliott, he's going to get his crew chief back. He's been running well. He finished second last year. He knows his way around this track. So I would say Elliott's just because he's running better. He's done better on short tracks this year. I would have been curious to see what he could have done at Bristol before the incident. So I think I would say Elliott, I think, is going to be there closer to the win than Johnson. I do think both can get a top 10, but I would give the nod to Chase narrowly. But with the similar odds, I would definitely go Chase this week.
All right, and lastly, CJ, you got Denny Hamlin at 15-1, and even though he finished fourth at Phoenix, which was one of his best results this year, this is definitely not the week to take Denny Hamlin. That's why he's 15-1. He only has one top 10 in his last 5 races. He's never won at Dover. Only one top 5 in his last 15 races at Dover. Then you've got Kurt Busch. Now, Kurt Busch may be an interesting long shot at 30-1. He was 10th at Phoenix, runner-up last week, and was second in this race last year. Early in the race, he got loose and had that wreck with Keselowski, but he's only had one top 5 since his win in 2011 at this track. But you are getting 30-1, and then you have Eric Almirola also at 30-1, 7th at Phoenix, 4 top 10s on the year. He was 5th in both races at this track in 2015, but Almirola's never led a lap here. So I think that'd be kind of hard to pick him at 30-1, somebody that's never led a lap at a track to win a race.
I probably would choose Eric Almirola of that bunch, to be honest with you. I think Denny Hamlin, he's one you got to write off pretty quickly. He's got a lot of top 10s. Recently here, 3 out of the last 4. He had an axle issue in the fall race, but just not getting through to the front of the pack. Kurt Busch is interesting because he's teammates to Kevin Harvick, and Stuart Haas has been so strong. He does have the win way back, but like you said, he hasn't done anything recently, just that lone top 5. But if you look at Almirola, I mean, how do you know? He's not been here with this car before. Like That's you said, back-to-back 5th place finishes in 2015. That shows that he's good because that was with a non-Stuart Haas car. So I think of the bunch, I think Almirola's probably got a little bit more upside, and that would make me give him the nod.
Before I let you go, CJ, what's going on over at RotoWire? Are you going to be working on this week?
Well, this week we got NASCAR. That's the only major race series going on. MotoGP is out in Spain, but next week we'll be gearing up with the start of festivities in Indianapolis. We got the Grand Prix of Indianapolis on the road course, and then we start qualifying and practice for Indy 500 at the end of the month. So getting to be that exciting time of the year.
All right, CJ, next week we'll do it again. More than likely, well, then again, it is a Saturday race, so we might do a Saturday show, or we'll do it on Thursday again. We'll make a decision, make the call. Either way, we look forward to speaking to you again real soon. Enjoy the race. Hopefully it's a good one.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, CJ. All right, that's CJ Radoon, and again, you can check out his RotoWire report on a link is available here on our website each week. Both of them, the recaps and the previews. What do you think about Almirola, Eric? Because he is kind of tempting based on the team is definitely helping him out. It's making him a better driver. The results are there. But not only has he never led a lap at Dover, he just really hasn't led laps. I don't even know how many laps he's led this year. Has he led many at all?
No, other than Daytona and the season opener towards the end there, and then I believe he led a few laps at Richmond. He kind of stormed to the front, and then he fell off. Other than that, no, he hasn't led many laps, and I agree with CJ out of that group. I would have taken him just because of what he did in 2015 with Richard Petty Motorsports.
Yep.
Imagine what he can do with Stuart Haas.
True.
But then again, if you look at Stuart Haas overall, they're not the best there. Harvick's done good, but if you look at what he's done really this team collectively has done since they switched to Ford last year at Dover, it's not real good. And you look at what Penske has done at Dover with Ford, it's not real good. So he scares me a little bit that it just doesn't seem to be a track that suits Ford real well. And they've had the same car this weekend as they've had there the last several years. So I don't see anything really changing. I think Almirola he might be a good fantasy play because I doubt he's going to really probably start in the top 15. He might be lucky to make it out of the first round, but I do think he can move his way up as the race goes on and maybe get you a top 10. I would say it might be a steal there if he gets a top 10, but I don't think he's going to challenge for the win unless something fluky happens where you got a late race caution and he doesn't pit for tires or something. And
you can do that
Johnson
here.
Rule.
You can do the no tire, 2-tire pit stops here. That's the one good thing about this track. If we get some late cautions, maybe if it's a boring race, we can have something go on.
That's about it. Yeah, that's the only way someone other than your Elliott, Johnson, Larson, Truex, Busch, Harvick, somebody outside of that group wins is going to be something fluky like that. Yeah.
All right, so that next week again is going to be Kansas Saturday night. Then we've got the All-Star race also on a Saturday night, and then after that, it's on to the big Sunday of the Coke 600 and the Indianapolis 500. And by the way, so Danica Patrick she's not doing anything at all except racing in the 500.
That is it. Yeah, she was out here. I was able to talk to her at the test here. She tested on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week here in Indy, and it was amazing to hear her say. I don't know. Have you seen any of her comments? What
No.
She said since she's got. So she went out and turned one lap and came back in, and they had an oil pressure problem. And water, the oil was right. The water was rising too high, so they switched everything out. She came back out, ran maybe 2 or 3 more laps, came in, and her comments were that the car felt heavy to turn. So the listeners keep in mind that the Indy car does not have power steering. NASCAR does. So those cars, basically you're muscling around. And the way NASCAR drivers, everybody notices on an onboard camera, they sit really close to the steering wheel. So their turning their arms aren't stretched out. Indy car is the opposite. They kind of picture yourself sitting in a bathtub is where they sit, kind of like if you're sitting on the back of the bathtub and have your feet up.
Okay.
And you stretch your arms out. So that's what they do. So keep in mind, the Indy car is about half the weight of a NASCAR, and she's saying this felt heavy. So the team thought, let's be safe here. Maybe it's something with the car. No, it was her. And she was commenting afterwards. She goes, this is almost embarrassing because I felt I was one of the most fit drivers out there with all the yoga I do, with all the workout, the eating I eat right. And I turned 4 laps in an Indy car, and this car felt extremely heavy to me.
Wow.
So she made the comments, and some people took it out of context that Indy car is much harder to drive than a NASCAR. And I want to give her a little bit of help here that she was basically saying as far as how physical an Indy car is compared to a NASCAR.
Sure.
You basically feel the whole steering weight, feel the weight of the car in an Indy car. And you can do some adjustments to it to make it feel lighter, but you may not be as fast, and you give up one area for another, where she is now basically treated as a full-blown rookie. She even admitted that when she came in the pit, she thought, I don't know how to slow this car down, because IndyCar is all paddle brakes, or paddle shifting and neutral and all that. You just have your pedals on the floor, but as far as the gas, your brake, but your clutch and everything is on the steering wheel, and she had no idea how to get the car in neutral. So she's coming on pit road, and IndyCar, unlike NASCAR too, you hit a button and you hit your pit road speed. She had no idea how to do any of that, and now foolishly I look back, I was actually standing on the pit road over the wall as her taking off and coming in, where she could have hit me. I didn't realize that she didn't know how to do any of this. So she's going to have an interesting month ahead of her, because she just started, so that's okay. You know, as long as she's not saying this a couple of days before the race, then exactly.
Yeah. So she's got time to figure it out, and but look, it's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It'll probably add a few more fans tune in, especially if she's anywhere near the top 10 at all. I'm not sure that's going to be the case. But hey, why not? I mean, you never know. It'd be it's the one thing though that we were just. I mean, with all the luck that we've seen in especially in NASCAR over the years with drivers that win races, especially the plate races. It was a shame that she never even lucked into a win. You know.
And she mentioned that yesterday. She had a media availability in her lunch session, and her comment, which is a little bit eye-opening too, was, "I wanted to come back to do Indy and end here because I became irrelevant in racing." And she goes, "It didn't start off that way. I was always talked about. I was always talked about what I could do, my potential, and then my last 2 years," she's basically said, "I was never picked to win a race, even restrictor plate races."
Sure.
She goes, "My name was never mentioned. I became an afterthought. I became pushed out. And she goes, and it was all my fault. I brought in all this hype, and I didn't live up to it. And basically, I was just there, and I wasn't having fun. And so this is my way to go out where maybe I can get talked about again." And so she basically mentions that she was just an afterthought in NASCAR, and she admitted that that's where it got to. And I didn't get to ask a follow-up question to it because there's so many media, but I'm just curious what her thoughts are on Eric Almirola right now, what he's doing in that car that she was in.
That's true, yeah.
But then again, I don't know how snappy she would have probably been back at that question. But, yeah, she was basically admitted she's an afterthought, and this is her way of going out with getting a name for herself again.
Sort of like Juan Pablo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
And this is it for her, though?
This is it. She has no desire to ever.
What's she going to do? What's her life going to be like?
She's going to focus on the whole nutrition and workout thing, and she's kind of got some personal endorsements going with her. So she's kind of going to go down the fitness route and kind of books and clothing lines and nutritional supplements and food and that type of thing.
Okay. So she doesn't want to
and you never know if her and Aaron Rodgers end up working out. I guess she could be part owner of the Milwaukee Bucks.
There you go. All right. So we are going to, of course, have our picks available on Sunday morning. So you want to check that out. We will tweet it out on our Twitter handle at PrimeSN. So that'll be available as we always do every week. Kenny Bruce, of course, also will chip in. We've got our future picks every week as well. When we get some time in the next couple of weeks, we'll talk more about that because we haven't really talked much about it, but we do post the future picks. Basically, those are championship picks, and we update those every week as well. So that's available on our website. And what you got going on this week, too, just the one race? At Race Review Online?
Just the one race, and then next week really ramps up with, as CJ said, I'll be here in Indy for the whole month of May for from the road course race to Indy 500 practice, to qualifying, to all that jazz, and then also I'll be covering the NASCAR content from Charlotte from here in Indy. So got a lot of it. May's really busy. It's good for the motorsports world.
All right. So appreciate it as always, Eric. For Eric Smith, for CJ Radun, I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in to Prime Sports NASCAR. And we will check back with us tomorrow late in the day for Prime Sports Horse Report, another form of racing. We're going to preview and handicap the Kentucky Oaks tomorrow with John Hardoon from the Sheets. And then we're going to give our picks for the Kentucky Derby, which is Saturday. So that's tomorrow, late in the day, probably somewhere close to 6 Eastern right here on the Prime Sports Radio Network. So we'll see you next week right here on Prime Sports NASCAR, Prime Sports Radio Network.